Good morning. Good morning. We are on page 419 in the Mimer of the Alta Mittler Rebbe. Finished the paragraph, which is the source text for a big part of the end of Hemshech Chaim Beis. And let's review what we learned. So, this whole paragraph, starting at the bottom of 417, brought us back to the example of the candle, Ner Hashem Nishma Sadam, the three components, which is the wick, the divine soul, the oil, the animal soul, that is transformed into fuel for divine love, and furthermore for divine light, the light of Torah Eir, the Eir it produces, which is all the way, like he said, the Eir that's not subject to Shinui, Hamahus, the Eir of Torah, that literally in an undiluted, unaffected way traveled from the highest levels down to the lowest levels down below. And furthermore, due to the Nefesh Abamis being transformed from darkness to light, you're actually reaching the Ma'ir. So you could actually say there's almost three levels here. He doesn't say that explicitly. One is that it reaches Avos Hashem, but after Hashem L'kecha B'chol Levavcha, loving God, that's through the neshama. Then Torah Eir Atzmi, the Eir that's not subject to Shini, but then to the Ma'ir, because we're going here now even further, the Chiddush of transforming darkness to light, Shemen La Ma'ir, which is Havai Yegia Choshchi, the Vav Nesefer Shalamayla Ma'ir de Torah. That's higher from the Eir de Torah, like the Baal Tshuva, that transforms darkness of Ra Gomor to light, which is greater from the Tzadikim Gemurim, who are in the world of Eir and Torah mitzvahs. And it's comparable to Torah Sheba'al Peh that we learned earlier, that also clarifies the cheshech of how we're supposed to live in this dark world according to Torah, Mamat Lamayl. That was the first part of what we learned. Then comes the second half, which is the end of the paragraph on page 419. And as I said yesterday, and I repeat again, I've gone over it a few times, I'm still not clear. I went through a lot of commentary on the Pasuk Ani Hashem Leishanisi Bnei Yisrael Lechalisam, which is the operative verse that he's quoting here, to see if there's some hints there. All the interpretations, Rashi, the Even Ezra, the Radak, don't really help. At least I couldn't see how they can help us understand this. Because what I was trying to really understand is the words of the Mittler Rebbe. He says, Matmiya, that the Pasuk is wondering. Matmi, he says it twice. So I thought that maybe in the commentaries there's something about the context of the verse. But there they all talk about Ani Hashem Leishanisi, that God doesn't change his promises and he stays consistent. Bnei Yisrael Lechalisim, they'll always be permanent. So the simple meaning of the verse is that just as Ani Hashem Leishanisi, God is immutable, and Bnei Yisrael will always be, there will always be an eternal nation, essentially. They will never be eliminated, God forbid. That's like the simple interpretation. But the Mittler Rebbe is using it clearly in this context that we're learning here, because he actually starts the parentheses by saying, he starts the parentheses by saying, V'zehu ani havai leishanisi, meaning that which we just learned, this is the meaning of Ani Hashem Leishanisi. But based on what we discussed yesterday, and I'll repeat it now again, it seems like more than a v'zehu, because he seems to be going further. He's trying to explain here how the Nefesh Abamis actually reaches a level of connection that does not need the Eir of Torah or the Eir of the Neshama, of the Nefesh Elikis. So I'm not sure if that's his conclusion, or if that's, I was thinking maybe the Matmiya means he's wondering, the Pasuk is wondering, can you say that? Based on what we learned till now. So I still have, this jury's still out, so to speak. I still need to do some research on this. But let me sum up what he does say. We know for sure what he says. And then I'll leave the rest for either further discussion or further research until I get to the bottom of it, or someone gets to the bottom of it. So basically he said, Shehu kematmiya. That's like he's wondering. Since Ani Hashem Leishanisi, Ani Havaya Leishanisi, why is he Leishanisi? Because it's the level of the Ma'ir, not the level of Oyer, the Ma'ir which is not subject to change. Oyer, he says, L'mayel Ma'ir, Oyer of Shema Vaya Shebetera Mitzvahs is subject to change. The Masha'ir, the Teira Meir Gamba Chesher, Zel Kamei B'chinas Shinui, says that clearly. Now, he doesn't say there's a Shinui in Teira, but there's a Shinui in reality, there's a Shinui happening here. Why? Because before, like he says, it was dark. After the Tzimtzum Arishan, there's no question there was a concealment. It's not an illusion. It's a real concealment. And then you shined in it the Teira. So it's true, the Torah was not affected by it because the Torah remains intact. But there's a shinui. The shinui is that from darkness came Yehi Oyer. So that's a shinui. But the Moyer, Aval B'Muhusiv Atzmusi Ein So Shanikra Moyer Hadi Kameka Chashech Keira. When you talk about the source, the luminary, from where it all originates, the Oyer as well, there is darkness and light are equal, which means that Tzimtzum doesn't conceal on that level. It's beyond concealment. You can conceal light that shines. You shine it, let's say a room has light shining in it. You can shut the light. You can conceal the light. You can put an obstruction that will not let the light shine in, curtains, opaque curtains, whatever it may be. But you cannot shut out something that's not subject to light and dark. It's like saying, if I darken the room, will it lose? Will the oxygen of the room disappear? I'm just using that as an example. Will subatomic particles disappear? No, because they're not subject to light and dark. How much more so the moed, the etzem amoyer, like he says, the chashech ke'era, b'li shinui klal, u'lekach gam cheshech le'yachshek klal le'klal. So darkness is the concealment. When a teacher, let's use the example of a teacher, he's teaching a student, and he has to conceal his brilliance, and just because the student will be overwhelmed. But does the concealment affect him? Not at all. He doesn't become less brilliant. He's not eliminating or extinguishing his mind. He's just not allowing it to express itself in a way that can in some way affect the student or overwhelm the student. So the teacher remains intact. The moyer, so to speak, within the teacher is beyond darkness and light. It's the oyer that's subject to change. The oyer that he's transmitting, is he going to say everything he knows? Is he going to say partially? Is he going to just be spoon-fed Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet? That's oyer, but not the moyer, which means the source of the intelligence. Using that example. So he says, so therefore you don't need lishin klal. You don't need oyer to dispel the darkness because he's not in that place. So based on that, and Yashem leishanisi, lakar gam cheshach the klipas nega is also not a cheshach meikare klal. From that perspective, even the cheshach of klipas nega, not just the tzimtzum elyon, the cheshach elyon, but the cheshach lamata, ain't sarach le'er de teira. That would be what we would derive from this concept. So I'm wondering, is he saying this as a statement, or matmiya is the pasuk so-called wondering? Is that indeed the case? So that I'm not sure about, because we were learning yesterday that this fits very well with Ayin Beis, that there's a level where the nefesh habamis, through its own distress, reaches that level that does not need Teda, like I said before, about it's higher than Teda, like Tshuva, higher than Teda. Or like we spoke about the light of the eye. The etzem koyach hariyah, la'asadav ve'nenu me'ires k'shemesh will not need light. Is he speaking about that? Or is he saying that since you talk about Ani Hashem le'shanisi, if the pasuk is wondering, does that also mean Bnei Yisrael lechalisam that the nefesh habamis does not need Teda? And maybe the pasuk is not concluding that way. I'm wondering. I don't know. I just say. Then he says. Then he continues. So it doesn't need er Teda, er neshama. Zeu shematmiya, and that's what the verse is wondering. Va'atam Bnei Yisrael chalisam b'mesiras nefesh the nefesh habamis. Actually, matmiya could also be not wondering, but saying something that's wondrous. Matmiya does not necessarily mean it's a question. It could be shematmiya. He's saying something. Shematmiya. He's like saying something with wonder and amazement. That this is an amazing idea. That's also you can translate matmiya which is more like we discussed yesterday. That now you, Bnei Yisrael, children of Israel, that lechalisam b'mesiris nefesh the nefesh habamis, the mesiris nefesh of nefesh habamis, b'shnei yitzarecha, when it achieves that level of love, total mesiris nefesh, b'chol Levovecho, then it says b'chol meidecha, b'chol Levovecho, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha, could be he's hinting to that. But regardless, the mesiris nefesh of the nefesh habamis, and apparently that's what he means by chalisam. Kiloyin, like kleisa nefesh, a mesiris nefesh, whereas the nefesh habamis is completely being like the oil, it's completely being absorbed and completely being consumed by the light of God, by the love of God. So that leichalisim means once it reaches that level, it's touching the moed. So as it touches the moed, just like the moed is not affected by darkness and light, now that the nefesh habamis has been so-called converted or transformed, it also is accessing shemen lamoed, a place that doesn't need any external light, including Torah. Not the but automatically it does not conceal because nefesh habamis has reached that highest source. That's what he says. What is not now, as I said, I've definitely leaned more to say that he's talking about a higher level of transformation of the nefesh habamis, which connects to the moed itself, like we learned about Einoid, the level that the Shema reaches all the way into the Helam Ha'atzmi. I don't want to comment now about Helam Ha'atzmi itself, because Helam Ha'atzmi, is that the level that's higher than light and dark? Because Helam Ha'atzmi, by definition, means a core state of concealment, but it doesn't mean necessarily concealment. I think that's why I want to look in Ayin Beis, which I didn't have a chance to do yet, to see if we can associate the two. We'll see. That's one part. Then finally, in the last parentheses, he says, Oye Efsher, he's saying another explanation in this verse. The mitam zeh, that Ani Hashem Leishanisi is the reason that a Bnei Yisrael Leichalisim, that, which means Ani Hashem Leishanisi is Havaya Yagia Choshchi, like we said before, is the level Vehavaya, that illuminates my darkness, because it's coming from a place that's higher than darkness and light. It transforms the darkness. Shegam HaCheshech Yeir Ka'er, that also darkness should radiate like light. Well, and due to that, now here it doesn't sound like he's talking about the nefesh habamis any longer, even though he does say chashchi and he says cheshach atzmei. But so what does he mean by this? Is he coming to say now that the pasuk is not? We're not talking about nefesh habamis necessarily, because in the pasuk when it says Bnei Yisrael, there's no hint to the animal soul, which is the way he explained it earlier. So maybe he's going to another simpler interpretation. But Yisrael talks about the neshamas in general. Now, when neshamas say Shema, which would mean Shema would be that they're completely losing themselves in loving God, lo ychalisam b'krishma, that they will not get annihilated in Krishma, because lo shanisi affects also the neshamas. So is he saying that he means to say also nefesh alakis? Is that what this parenthesis is adding? That was what I was speculating. I'll continue to speculate. Or does he mean something else? I've, again, not concluded how this parenthesis, the most likely is what I just said. Because he says now, Efsher, another Oy Efsher, that he's talking the Shamis, Leichalisim. But then you have to explain, what does the Cheshach have to do with this? You know, by Nefesh Habamis, the darkness doesn't darken, makes total sense. Because Nefesh Habamis began in a state of darkness. But here, what's the connection to Cheshach, to Havaya Yagia Choshchi, when you're talking about the Neshamis? Leichalisam, B'Krishma. Or does he mean to just say in general that because we connect to Ani Hashem Leishanisi, nothing can eliminate us, even the Cheshach can't eliminate us? In other words, even when we go through darkness, and through Golus, and through Tsaris, and so on. Is that what he's saying? It's possible. That's why I said I don't have a definitive final interpretation. There's a few ways to explain it, but I just still wanted to sum it up, and that's where we are, at least from my point of view. Obviously, I invite and welcome anyone to comment if you have thoughts of a different way of explaining it, but trying to fit it into the words that he's saying here. But that's so far what I have, and that's where I can stop right now in the summation and see if anybody wants to comment or ask, and before we continue. Yeah.
I have a question. why consulting Torah commentators that are not necessarily typically considered Kabbalistic and certainly not Hasidic would be able to, why you would think that they would comment on that issue that we're talking about, that the birur caused by the transformation of the lowest level to the highest level, which is to the Helam Ha'atzmi. Why would any of the? I mean, with great respect to our brilliant sages, why would they comment on that issue, which is fundamentally Kabbalistic and Hasidic?
Well, I would go the other way around. The Mittler Rebbe is explaining a pasuk, and it's important to see how that pasuk is interpreted in its source, because it could be he's referring to a particular way that it's interpreted, and based on that, he's explaining what he's saying here.
I see. There could be interpretation that you don't remember or not familiar with that explains this. I see.
Well, you always do that whenever you see an interpretation of a verse, especially if you don't understand it well. You go back to the original verse and you look at all the commentaries to see how they explain the verse, and maybe something will appear that will help understand what like in other words, are they reading the pasuk as a statement? Are they reading the pasuk as a comparison? Are they reading the pasuk as a wonder? Because it's a big statement. Ani Hashem le'shanisi, I God are immutable. B'nei Yisrael le'chalisam. So you could read it many ways. Verses are explained different ways, different commentaries. Anyway, that's just the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I would just real quick, I follow up. I mean, I obviously, if you don't know with certainty what the end statement means, obviously I don't. But I would just say that nothing that you said regarding the psukim before the last part of this paragraph conflicts with or is inconsistent with the interpretation that you gave yesterday. And he ends with Dalam Avin, which means like he's not necessarily going into a lot of detail, and we're not exactly. I mean, I'm not the most brilliant Hasidic scholar. You may be, but to me, this jumped out at me as referencing the interpretation we discussed yesterday, and furthermore, it connects. Meaning, above he discusses how there can be a birur that's above neshamas and Torah, or doesn't depend on them. Let's put it that way.
I mean, I said it yesterday, so I know what I said, so I understand, but I still am not ready to say definitively that's what these parentheses are saying.
There's still a possibility, right?
I'm the one that said it when I explained it that way yesterday. So I know it, so it's not like I don't know what I said. I know what I said. I just am saying that I still am not sure that this is the definitive meaning in these paragraphs. I would like it to be. It seems to fit, but I still need to do more research. That's my point.
Okay.
Can I offer something that I see here that maybe you'll resonate? I think that the Mittler Rebbe is just comparing Hashem to the human being, because he's saying, just like it says about Ani Hashem lo shinisi, hu be'atzmuso is lo shinisi, but on a lower level there is or and choshech, and so the tmiha is that the klipas noga also be'atzmuso no shinisi. So with tmiha, what do you mean lo kalisam? Of course, we're not going to be kalisam, because we're no hu be'atzmuso, just like Hashem is be'atzmuso lo shinisi, but he does change in the outer level. Then we're also be'atzmuso, impossible to destroy.
I thought that's what I said, but okay. I think what you're saying is the different words of what I said before.
The tmiha is, of course, we're not going to be kalisi.
Okay. As I said, what I hear from you is different words of what I said before. So yeah, obviously this is possible. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? We'll continue. So let's continue the new paragraph. As I said, I'll get back to this. I want to look into it more. I'll get back to it. So he says like this now. New paragraph, page 419. The pages can be found at ayambeis.com. V'zeu inyan hemshech HaDevorim b'parsha Shema. And this is also going to explain, this is also the hemshech, the flow, the continuation of Parsha Shema. Remember, Shema starts, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. If you recall, we learned earlier, we also spoke about the two brachas that are before Shema, Birchas Yetzer and Birchas Avos Elam. And we spoke about Psukkah de Zimra. So now he's moving further. Shema, Baruch Shem, leads to V'haftas Hashem Elokecha, Shnei Yitzarecha, that both the Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Habamis are loving God. And now he's going to continue with the Shema continuing in this, based on this explanation. So what's the Hemshech HaDevorim b'Parsha Shema? B'Masha Kosav, b'Masha Omar, b'Masha Kosav, V'hafta b'chol levavcha tchila. The first he says, V'hafta b'chol Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, with all your heart, which is referring to B'shnei Yitzarecha, Shehu, Kiloyin, the Nefesh Habamis canal. Kiloyin, the absorption or the dissolving or the consumption, like the Kiloyin Hashemen, that the oil dissolves into the wick as it turns into a flame, into fire, into oil, into the moir. Shehu Hashemen, which is the oil. Al Yedei, Hizbonenus the Nefesh Elokis. And how does this happen? Through the contemplation of the divine soul. So he's going back to the original discussion here that is coming from the divine soul. But Parsha Rishon the Shema Yisrael, that the divine soul is contemplating in the first Parsha of Shema Yisrael before V'hafta, Dafke. So when it contemplates Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, as the Alter Rebbe explained it in his Maimer, and the Mittler Rebbe explained it at length, and we learned this also in Ayam Beis. Hashem Echad, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad is the two levels of Yichud, Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tata, and then the joining of both of them. Ultimately, that the animal soul comes to understand that it itself, the animal soul itself, is all part of a higher divine unity, and that impresses the animal soul to join the divine soul in loving God. That's the contemplation. And the levels we learned about going higher and higher. Based on this, it would appear, if indeed the parentheses at the end of the last paragraph is taking it to another level, so the Mittler Rebbe is definitely going back to the original discussion that it's the Nefesh Elokis that brings this love to the animal soul. And then the parentheses comes to emphasize there may be a higher level. But it's still in a parentheses, and as I said, the Rebbe Rashab says it's an inyan b'fnei atzmei. That would be the way to interpret it, if indeed we're correct in understanding what that parentheses has to say. But regardless, to continue. So that's the order. Shema, then we go to V'hafta. So the contemplation of Shema led to a love, b'chol levavcha, with all your heart, meaning with both sides of your heart, the right and left side of the heart. Yetzer tev, yetzer hara, nefesh elokis, nefesh habamis. But then the Shema continues. What's next? After we say, v'hoya HaDevorim ha'ela asher anechi mitzavcha hayom al levovecho. And may these words, v'hoya HaDevorim, these words that I commanded you today should be upon your heart. What is this referring to in the context of what we're just talking about, the contemplation of the divine soul that leads to the transformation of the dissolving of the animal soul into fuel for the God, divine love and divine light. Pirush, so he's going to explain what this comes to add now. After we have that dissolving or absorbing or consumption, I'm using all three words, or the consuming of, the cholavavcha that we talked about, that also the animal soul has all been consumed now into this fire, into this love, into this light, in the divine light, b'mesiras nefesh. And here clearly says again, b'mesiras nefesh, with total self-sacrifice. B'bitl, with elimination of kol rotzen zar, the klippas nega, of any strange desire from the klippa, from the radiant husk. Rotzen zar is referring to all the desires of the animal soul that are strange and alien to Elokus, which means physical pleasures, hedonistic desires, everything that we consider to be Ratzon Zar. Zar is an expression, strange to Lakus. Like you say, Aveda Zara, Aveda Shazara Loy, and Aveda that's strange to us. So that's the Keloin. That has been completely eliminated because the oil is being consumed by the fire. It's not serving its own interests. So after this Keloin, so after this Keloin, now we come to another level. Remember he said that after the Avahafta, then comes that it elevates to the level of Eir of Teda. So the Mittler Rebbe is explaining that's the order. That's V'hoya Advarim Eila. Hadoya Advarim Eila is Teda. These words, the words of Teda. So now, after you've eliminated its animalistic desires, and the contrary, you turned it into a force, a fuel for loving God. So now it elevates, it becomes a keli, a container to receive the ha'aras eir, the reflection of light of Teda. Shameir b'me'er ein sof atzmei dafke kanal. So you could say, is this a repeat of what he said in the previous page? Somewhat. But he's now putting it into the order in Shema. Before, he just said that it goes up to the level of Eir de Teda. As I pointed out, that's what it says in Alter Rebbe's Maimon in one half a line. The Mittler Rebbe explained it. But now he's fitting it into the order here. So that's how it goes. First comes the Avis Hashem of the animal soul. Then now it's becoming a keli to the light, which is a Eir Atzmi. Here he calls it Eir Ein Sof Atzmei Dafke. In other words, not just to the love that comes from Nefesh HaLekis, which can still be limited, but it's taking us to the Eir of the Eir Ein Sof Atzmei that's in Teda. V'hu Masha Kosav, or Masha Omar, V'hoya. You say V'hoya Advarim Eila, V'hoya Memela. When you say the word V'hoya, and they will be, it comes Memela. What's the word V'hoya? It could have said Hadvarim Eila. The expression could have been Hadvarim Eila Shanech Mitzav Chayim should be Levovecho, Levovecho. So V'hoyu means that after you've gone through that Aveda, Memela, the next step is you've now primed the animal soul to be directed toward being a fuel to divine love. It becomes Memela, V'hoya Advarim Eila, the Divrei Teda, Be'er de Teda. Of the words of Teda. So now the Nefesh Habamis will Memela start speaking the words of Teda with the Be'er Teda Shemelubeshes Behen, Mibchinas Anechi, Misha Anechi, Shul Atzmus the Ein Sof Mamish Kanal. Which in these words of Teda, what is it Melubish in these words of Teda? So you now add something he didn't say earlier. It all starts from Anechi, Anechi Hashem Alekecha. Anechi, Misha Anechi, which is referring to Atzmus, Ein Sof Mamish Kanal. So like I pointed out in the previous classes, you could say the Nefesh Habamis could elevate, but who says it could elevate all the way up to a level of Ani Hashem Leishanisi, a level of Eir Teda that is completely beyond, that remains intact on this level, that it's a keli for, that it's manifesting Anechi Sheb Atzmus Ein Sof Mamish Kanal. But that's what the Hoya Advarim Eila is coming to say, that after V'ahavta Hashem Alekecha, after the koloin of the Nefesh Habamis, and you've cleaned it up, basically you've removed all the pollutants and all the toxins, and Nefesh Habamis is now a fuel to the Ner, to the candle. Now it goes even higher to the level of Teda Eir, which is in turn drawing down Anechi Mishanechi from Atzmus Ein Sof Mamish. Essentially what he said earlier about what Teda is, the level of Ma and Bittul, that Teda is Atzmus Eir, that is not subject to Cheshach. Well, we still need to understand, so how is that consistent with what it said in the parentheses, that he does not need Eir de Teda, because the Eir de Teda is seemingly subject, because it does go through a change between darkness and light. So I have ways to reconcile that, but I'm going to leave that after I first analyze it a bit more. But here he's clearly going back to the fact that Teda Eir, like we learned earlier, does not affected by any, has no shinui. He says clearly that Teda Eir also has no shinui mehus. The Teda as it is above, that's how it comes down below. And when you reveal it, it's exactly like before creation and after creation without shinui. So point being is now that the Nefesh Habamis has become a keli to that. That's V'hoya Advarim Eila. Okay. V'zeu asher anochi mitzavcha. So now we have the words, and the pasuk asher anochi mitzavcha. This again is from Torah, and Alter Rebbe speaks about this, and I'll point it out a little later once we finish the whole subject, or maybe soon. So it says asher anochi mitzavcha. What's the diuk asher anochi mitzavcha? That I myself, God says, I have commanded you. So he says that is Ashahu atzmus the Ein Sof mamish. Shu bal harotzen ha'elyon. Remember, we learned before there's the rotzen of Hashem, and there's the bal harotzen. So the bal harotzen is Anochi. V'chochmei law the Torah mitzvahs. The bal harotzen ha'elyon and the chochmei law of Torah mitzvahs. She'oir zeh meir gam l'chesher the klipas neged the nefesh habamis. That this light radiates and illuminates also in the darkness of the klipas nega of the animal soul. Because like we learned earlier, there's no shinei mahus in the Torah. So the Torah is not subject to anything that can stop it. It will pierce every darkness. And that's what's happening here. Coming from Anochi, which is the Bal HaRotzen, where Torah Nitzis originates from, and that has the power to pierce and transform the darkness of the animal soul, because there's no Shinei Mehus at all in Torah. And now you understand why I'm still having a problem with the parentheses, because the parentheses, it seems to suggest that Nefesh Habamis can have this without Erev Torah. What does that mean? Here he's saying clearly that Torah itself is like Leisha Nisi. Shini Mahus. So are there two levels? Ani Hashem Leishanisi and the level of Torah. Not clear. That's why I'm just pointing out why I'm not so final, so definitive about the parentheses, just for the record. But regardless, it's clearly what he's saying. He's also said it before, and that's that. I'll stop here. Any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Could it be who Atzmo Dafka is referring to the human being, that the light is coming from himself, Dafka, meaning the
Where do you see the
human.
word? What line are you reading?
1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth line, the last word, Atzmo.
Ein Sef Atzmai. It's from Ein
Right,
Sef itself.
Right.
Not talking about the person.
But okay, so the way I understood it is that the word kalisi is kilyon, is to hand over your nefesh and to empty your hearts of your nefesh and your ratzon, and then it becomes empty, it becomes a keli. Now it's an empty keli, which is the same word, kalisi, and now it becomes from the kilyon, it turns into a keli that the Or Ein Sof could fill. But he's saying, which Or Ein Sof is it that's filling it? It's the Or Ein Sof Atzmo, Dafka. It's his own, meaning the
Whose
Hashem
own?
and
Whose own? God's own or the human being's own?
No, the human whose Atmos is Hashem's Atmos. In other words,
No,
we clear
it's not
the
what
way
it means.
for.
I'm sorry, it's not what it means.
Oh, Shema.
What do you think?
Yuval, can you please
He used this expression several times earlier. He means from Or Ein Sof itself, not through diluted. Can everybody mute, please? Here.
Yuval, can you please mute?
Yeah. That's not what he means. Or Ein Sof Atzmei means Atzmei is going on Or Ein Sof of Hashem. And it's correct to say, yes, he said clearly, to become a keli, lekabel ha'oris de Torah, shemer bo me Or Ein Sof Atzmei. That radiates from Or Ein Sof Atzmei, from Hashem's Or Ein Sof. That's, to me, very clear. Whether kaloyin means also the word keli or not, maybe, maybe not. I don't know if that's the meaning here. Doesn't bother me if you want to interpret it that way, but it's not. He doesn't say it explicitly, maybe. But regardless, what he means Or Ein Sof Atzmei, he said it several times. He means Or Ein Sof itself. Yeah.
Rabbi Jacobs, I have a question. If you get you could be, maybe you may have experience with this, but even so-called the Jewish atheists that don't believe in anything, supposedly, right? If you give them a Sefer Torah, tell them drop it. They would never do it. Under no circumstance, they would never do it. Is this the level we're talking about? Yeah,
Where
or
do you
is it?
see, where's he talking about this? That's in
No,
Tanya
I'm
chapter
talking
18.
about the connection, the deep connection that you're talking about. I'm saying, is that the animal soul that also is not willing to do it, or is it the godly soul that at that
What
moment
you're
takes
saying
over?
now seems to me to fit the Tanya chapter 18. I don't see any connection to anything we're learning here.
Okay.
I don't see any connection here.
My
But
thing
you're
was
talking about the Nefesh Habamis itself reaching.
correct.
As I said, I don't know if that's what he means here. It's not necessarily what he even means here. If you go back to Ayin Beis, you're talking about the Nefesh Habamis, the distress of the animal soul hitting rock bottom. There maybe, but the idea of a Kal Shebekalim, a person with Mesiras Nefesh, that every, like he says in Tanya, is not what we're discussing here. We're not talking about every soul will be Meiser Nefesh. That's a whole other discussion. Here he's talking about the in Ayin Beis by Ein Eid, he's talking about the distress, like about Tshuva. The thirst is so deep that thirst in turn draws from the highest levels of the divine. So I wouldn't connect it to that right now. It's too many. I'm trying to understand what it says here. It's too many. I mean, you could process, but for me it's distracting because it's another topic. I don't see how it fits in here.
I have a question about why he's talking about a birur here with the second parak of Shema. In particular, Zo Asher Noch Mitzrayim Shehu Bala Ratzon Shahalion Chachma Ilad Tor Mitzvah Sheor Zet Meir Gam Lechoshet Klipus Nogad Nefesh HaBahamas. Okay, so we just talked about how the first psukim of Shema, if you do it correctly, creates a kilyon, which is essentially putting the Nefesh Bahamas at a level of subjugation such that it can elevate itself already at that level through the first, even just the first pasuk of Shema, not even the first two, although we talked about it both ways. And yet he's saying, what? But in the second parak, when it says Hayom, it's really Atmos or Ein Sof, and that power of. Did you understand the question?
Yeah, I thought I answered it around 3-4 times. The answer is, first of all, in the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, he says that Ner Mitzvah v'Torah Eir, that it elevates not just to the level of Ner, but also the level of Torah Eir. And the explanation is, he wants to say, you could argue that the Nefesh Habamis, being an animal soul, could only go that far up. It could only hit the candle of Neshama, which is not necessarily the level of Eir Ein Sof Atzmei, of Anochi Misha Anochi, of the highest level of the Etzem.
I see.
So what he's saying, that's the key thing here. That's why he didn't say it only here. If you go back on the previous page, 418, and that's why I read back in Torah the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, makes it very clear that we want to elevate the animal soul, not just to loving God, which is a great level, with all your heart, both sides of the heart, but to actually reach the level of Eir Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Like we spoke about Ayin Beis, the interface is not just to reach the highest levels of Eir, it's to reach that post-Tzimtzum, where there's a Nefesh Habamis and a Cheshach should be able to experience pre-Tzimtzum consciousness.
I see. Thank you.
I'm sure you've heard me say that, right? Before.
Of course. But no, I did. But in the context of Shema, and we really haven't talked about the second parak ever, to my recollection.
Well, now he's taking this whole explanation and showing how all this lies in the prayer itself.
It's like a two-step process, if you will. First, you say the first.
It's more than
parak.
2 steps, frankly. I think it's more like 5-6 steps. I
Okay.
But yes, it's a multi-step
process. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then he continues. Va'achar kach. And what comes next in Shema? V'shenantam levonecha. V'debarta bam. And you shall teach it to your children. And you should speak with debarta bam. And you should speak these words of Torah. And what is this referring to? So now everything we learned till now, the whole introduction is about Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, and Torah in general, Torah is now coming alive here because we're talking about the Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam on its own can contemplate and Shema and bring a love, but then comes Ner Mitzvah V'Torah that are assets, further resources that help elevate the animal soul, like we learned, all the way to Torah and now to Torah Shebal Peh, Shezehu Torah Shebal Peh. So HaDevorim Asher Neichim Mitzav Chayim is Torah Shebiksav. This is Torah Shebal Peh. Chochma Shebedibur. That's V'Dabarta Bam. Remember, the Dibur Bal Peh means you're speaking with your mouth. To speak, that's the level of Torah Shebal Peh. La'ayin, iyun, upilpul, la'afechesha chagas kanal. To delve into and immerse ourselves in depth and with a pilpul, the pilpul of Torah Shebal Peh, with a dialogue and discussion and arguments and counter-arguments to transform the darkness to light, which is what Torah Shebal Peh does, kanal. Cheshach hagas, to transform the thick, the crass darkness. So you see here how all of this is now part of the big picture. A neshama armed with mitzvah, and now armed with Torah, and now Torah Shebal Peh. All of this is coming to transform our lives, our animal soul, and our physical lives into an experience of the divine, the highest levels of the divine. V'zeu v'shenantam. And this is the meaning of the word v'shenantam from the word Mishnah. Shu ha-Mishnah v'ha-Talmud. Mishnah comes from the same shenantam. To teach, a learning, a lesson. Ha-Mishnah v'ha-Talmud v'dibarta bam. And you speak in it. V'shetluyim b'dibur b'peh. It's dependent on our speaking with our mouths. We have to speak it. Well, Torah Shebal Peh. K'moi dvar melech shilten. Like the word of the king rules, governs. Kach masnisin malkasa. Same thing, the Mishnah is called the queen, like the king, ligzer, eimer ze kosher v'ze posel, to decree. In other words, a decree that comes from the Dvar Melech, from the word of the king or queen. This is kosher, v'ze posel, and this is not permitted. Let's explain elsewhere. So v'shenantul v'necha v'debarta bam is Torah Shebal Peh. That's, of course, drawing from Torah Shebiksav, but now turning it into actual decrees, actual laws, and halachas that tell us what exactly is acceptable, what is not. Ulefi zeh. And according to this, v'dibarta bam. The word bam, what is bam referring to? That's why it makes the quotation mark, because it's emphasizing the word. It's like underlining the word. Lashon hanhage. Hanhage is dvar malchus. That bam is emphasized in Lashon hanhage, dibarta bam, which means hanhage means obviously behavior, governance. Hanhage is dvar malchus. Shetadaber v'tanig gam ba'ef bam. Shetadaber v'tanig bam. Efen haberurim derapach. V'er cheza mamat l'mayla. About the bum. Bum means to speak about them. Bum, to speak with. You should discuss them. That's what the debarta bum means. I think he's teaching a lashon an hoge kan hoges dvar malchus atadav v'tanig bum.
I think what he's saying is that taking Vahayu Advarim Ha'ele, which is Torah Shebiksav, and the V'dibarta bam, which is that's Lamayla Lamata, and then you take those words. The Dibarta bam, Lashon Hanhaga basis, that should govern your actions, and that should enable you to do a birurim below milamata lamayla.
It's about what I was about to say. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering why the bum, why is emphasizing the word bum, the Dibarta bum. You shall talk about them. I think it means to analyze.
Inside.
He's talking about
Inside
analyzing the words, like he said, pilpul. You're analyzing them in a way to know how to turn them into a working document, like we said, a working plan. He said, anhage, to know how to behave, kan hogas dvar malchus shetadav v'tanig bom eifan habirurim, the way of the birurim. Like we said, we need Teresh Valpeh to create the clarity of the Rapach is the Rapach Nitzutze Kedusha, the 288 sparks of the divine that are trapped or locked in this world. The Er Chezer, like we spoke about, the refractive light going from the bottom up, Mamata Lamayla. So yes, Teresh B'Ksav is Mamaya Lamata, and here Teresh Valpeh is the involvement and engaging with it. All the details, the Barta Bum, immersing ourselves with it in it. Maybe that's a good word here, immersing ourselves. And they're drawing out from the bottom up this clarity of what we should be doing. So there you have the AdHaMtz Bereishis, and then comes V'shenanta Levovecho v'dibarta bam, the Torah Shebal Peh. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I see right away here it gives another pirush. Oy pirush, another pirush of v'dibarta bam. Well, we'll learn that on Sunday. You know what? Let me read this just to finish. I'll read 2 more lines. Oy, or the pirush of a debarta bam is as follows: Sha'ideh dibur, through the dibur, v'debarta, through the speaking, nimshach legili ein sof b'chochma de Torah. That here he's talking about that the dibur is drawing it out in a way that clarifies and the details of how we should live our lives, kosher, puzzle, and so on. Now he's saying dibur is actually for above. It draws the Gilead Ein Sof b'chachma de Torah, like he said earlier, that you need the person, the neshama, to draw the Eid Ein Sof in Torah. K'may Eisik b'Torah l'shma l'Shema Torah. Like when we say next page, top of 420, that when someone learns Torah l'shma, l'shma means not for any other reason except for the Torah itself. So Chassidus explains to draw elikus into the Torah. That when we learn Torah, we're drawing elikus. So the debarta he's using now, but debarta bam means that you're drawing the elikus into the Torah. That's a different interpretation of a debarta bam. The first one is that it's bringing it down into anhaga, into birur. The second is that it's bringing the Ein Sof into Torah. But here I will stop here, and we will continue on Sunday. The Shem Torah. Yeah.
Can I just suggest that bum is inside the words? Like teva means like a word, and it also means like something that holds. So in the words, when we're hafach ba v'hafach ba on the Torah, we find secret inside the words, in the words themselves. Maybe that's what bum.
It could be, but I don't know if that's what the Mittler Rebbe is saying here.
He's saying bum inside them.
No, but he explains what he means by bum. But I don't think what you're saying is what he's saying. What you're saying may be correct, but I don't know if it's what he's saying here.
Well, I mean, in a sense, what Elisheva is saying is the same thing, because Torah Shebal Peh is a pilpul, is a dialectic of discussion of the inner meaning of Torah Shebiksav. You take Psukim Torah Shebiksav to make your proof on how you can apply Torah Shebiksav, which is sort of like the hard source code, as you like to say, and applying it in practical,
That's why I said it's possibly that it's correct. But do you see it? But he says bum, he says lashon hanhaga. He doesn't say lashon of immersion.
Like
I'm saying it could be correct. I don't see it in the language here. That's all I said.
But here, what he says, the rapach, in other words, there's nitzotas inside the
but he says, but the batam bum, he says lashon hanhaga. It's talking about hanhaga, how to behave, which means to speak with tadaber v'tanig bam ofen habirurim, that you speak and you follow the guidelines of these words in how to be mevarer, how to clarify the 288 sparks in Er Chezer. Does it also hint to the fact that there are sparks bum hidden inside? Maybe. I don't see it in the actual language here. And I'm trying to just read as it says here. Okay. So we'll stop here, top of page 420.
Do you want to stop the recording?
Any other comments or questions?
I wanted to ask you about your talk yesterday about the burning of the shul and Sefer Torah, but I don't know if you want to do it on the recording or not.
Yeah, we could. Why not? If you want.
How did that go?
Did you hear it?
I haven't had a chance to know. That's why I was asking.
It went very well, I think. I mean, it was very moving. It's recorded. It was all streamed and recorded. I thought it was very moving, very touching, and uplifting. I mean, the
Was
whole
it a
synagogue
radio?
went-
Was it a radio interview? You were on the radio. Was it an interview? You
No,
gave,
no, it
like,
was a
a
live.
lecture?
It was a live event in Pomona, New York,
Oh, I see.
right in front of the burned down synagogue.
Wow.
So the whole synagogue burned down, literally nothing left, whole thing. And the 3 Sefer Torah was standing there that were destroyed, that we were like so-called,
Almost like a levaya.
well, it is a levaya, except in Nisan, they bury it after the Nisan, but it's called a levaya,
Oh, wow.
and that's what you're supposed to do. It's a levaya, an actual levaya, and we were like, in a sense, eulogizing the Torah.
Wow. Wow. Did they know any more about what caused the fire?
I did something after that. Maybe that's what I did a radio show on my way back. I did a radio
Yeah.
show.
That's what I was referring
That was a
to, yeah.
separate thing on Pesach. That was a separate.
Oh, I see. I see. I see. Did they know any more about what caused the fire? The arson?
I think they're investigating. I don't. When I was there, they did not know. Okay, so let's stop here. Papa